Today, we invite you to listen to the story. In my own home, I was beaten senseless by my mother-in-law, each curse like salt in my wounds. My husband silently walked upstairs, abandoning me to my fate. I thought he had chosen indifference, but just a few minutes later, he came back down, holding something that left my mother-in-law speechless and plunged the entire house into a suffocating silence. If you wish to discover the truth behind this story, please listen and enjoy it now. That day, in a house that was small, yet always felt heavy with scrutinizing eyes, long sighs, and sharp criticisms, I endured an afternoon I could never forget. The meal had just ended, and before we could even clear the table, my mother-in-law, a woman who always carried a storm of temper and bitterness within her, suddenly erupted in fury. It wasn't for any significant reason. Simply because I had accidentally dropped a few peas on the table, she immediately roared, her eyes flashing with a rage as if I had committed a terrible crime. "You clumsy fool! After all these years, you can't even do something as simple as eat properly. I am so ashamed to have a daughter-in-law like you." Her voice hissed, cold and heavy. Before I could explain, her hand swung through the air. The slap struck my face, leaving me stunned. The sharp crack echoed in the frighteningly silent room. Before I could recover, she lunged at me, hitting and scolding me relentlessly, as if trying to unleash all the frustrations of her life onto my body. I shrank back into the corner of the wall, feeling like a helpless child trembling before my mother-in-law's wrath. A question kept replaying in my mind. Why does she treat me like this? What did I do that was so wrong to deserve these blows and her venomous words? My eyes darted towards the staircase, where my husband, Ethan, was standing. He watched the scene unfold for a few seconds, his face showing no emotion, then turned and walked straight up to our room. My heart sank. In that moment, I felt more alone than ever. The husband I once thought would be my lifelong support now stood by indifferently, leaving me in the tempest of his mother's anger. She didn't stop. Each slap, each blow, seemed designed to crush the last shred of dignity I had left. The pain was searing, and a sob caught in my throat, tears streaming down my face. I wanted to fight back, to scream at the top of my lungs, to ask her, "Mom, I am your family too. Why are you so cruel to me?" But my throat was tight, and not a single word would come out. In a daze, I vaguely saw Ethan's silhouette coming back down the stairs. By then, I had lost all hope, thinking he was just coming down to get something before ignoring me again. However, he was carrying something in his hand that made my mother-in-law stop in her tracks, and her eyes, always so full of authority, suddenly changed. Before I continue, I want you to understand a little more. I am Hannah, 32 years old, and I have been married to Ethan for 4 years. From the day I married into this family, nothing has been easy. My husband is a kind, gentle man, but he is too submissive to his mother. In our house, the word of his mother, Margaret, was practically law. Neither Ethan nor I dared to defy her, because a single word of disagreement could turn our home into a living hell. I had tried to be patient countless times, thinking that one day she would understand, that she would come to love me as a daughter. But with each passing day, she became more domineering, treating me like an unwanted burden in this family. Today, the scene of a mother-in-law beating her daughter-in-law in front of her son seemed to be the breaking point, but it was also the moment that pushed my life's story onto a different path. Because the object Ethan brought down from the room upstairs not only startled my mother-in-law, but was also the detonator for all the conflicts that had been simmering for years. He said nothing, simply walked straight down the stairs, his hand tightly clutching an old, worn-out journal. I recognized it immediately. It was the journal Margaret kept locked in her nightstand, a book she never allowed anyone to touch. It wasn't just any ordinary book. It was a diary. Or, more accurately, it was the place where she had written her most private thoughts about the family, including the secrets she had hidden for so long. When he placed the journal on the table, his eyes were sharp and cold as he looked directly at his mother. "Mom, I think it's time you looked back at everything you've done and understood why you've lost everyone's respect today." The room fell silent. Margaret's hand, still raised midair, froze. A tremor ran through her eyes before she quickly regained her hardened expression. "You? Where did you get that? Who gave you permission to touch my things?" Her voice trembled, a stark contrast to her usual commanding tone. I was still crumpled on the floor, the hot sting of the slap burning my cheek, but a sense of curiosity began to rise in my heart. What on earth was in that journal that could make my mother-in-law, a woman who always raised her voice, who always had to be in control, show such visible panic? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me. In his eyes, I saw something deeper than just protection. Perhaps he had discovered a secret, and it was that very discovery that made it impossible for him to remain silent any longer. My mother-in-law took a step back as if to distance herself from the journal, but her eyes never left it for a second. I knew that for her, that book was a tomb for the things she most feared being exposed. And now, the very son she had always trusted to be obedient was the one placing it on the table like a challenge. The atmosphere in the house grew thick. I sat there, trembling and waiting. I didn't know what Ethan would say or do next. But my intuition told me that from this moment on, my life would never be the same. Did that old journal contain a truth powerful enough to change everything? Or was it just filled with harmless, rambling words? I didn't know. I only knew that my mother-in-law, the iron-willed woman, was truly trembling. And I, who had just endured a painful beating, suddenly felt my heart pound. Was it possible that for the first time, the balance of power in this house was about to shift? The room seemed to freeze. The steady ticking of the wall clock suddenly became piercingly clear, like a knife slicing through the thick, tense air. I could even hear my own ragged breathing, mixed with the sound of my mother-in-law swallowing nervously. The old journal sat squarely on the table, looking as ordinary as any other, but it seemed to hold an invisible power that commanded everyone's attention. Ethan remained standing, his gaze cold and resolute. He was no longer the meek husband who stayed silent during his mother's tirades. Now, he was like a different person, strong, determined, and defiant. Margaret glared at him, her eyes bloodshot, her voice shaking but still trying to cling to her authority. "Give that back to me. Those are my private matters. No one is allowed to touch them." Ethan didn't move. Just a faint, bitter smile played on his lips. "Your private matters, Mom? Are you sure they're only your private matters? Are you sure this book doesn't contain things that concern this entire family, that concern me, and that concern Hannah?" My heart hammered against my ribs. I had never seen Ethan speak to his mother with that tone. He had always been kind, accommodating, always seeking to avoid conflict. Yet now, he was confronting her directly, without a trace of fear. What in that journal had changed him so completely? Margaret took another step back, and then cried out, as if screaming, "You will not open it. I forbid you." But the more she forbade it, the more I could see the fear in her eyes. It was no longer simple anger, but the frantic terror of a secret about to be unearthed. Ethan picked up the journal and quickly flipped through a few pages. The rustling of the paper made even me flinch. I held my breath, watching with a mix of curiosity and dread. Margaret lunged forward to snatch it, but he sidestepped her. He held the journal up high, his voice firm. "I think it's time, Mom. We can't let you keep hiding this, keep tormenting others because of the resentment in your heart." Then he read aloud, his voice clear and deliberate. "Date. I've made a decision today. I cannot let anyone know this truth. If it comes out, I will lose everything: my family, my reputation, the respect I have worked so hard to build. I must bury it forever, even if it means I have to live in torment." Margaret shrieked, "Enough! Stop reading!" She rushed at him, but Ethan snapped the book shut, his eyes still fixed on her. "Mom, I wasn't planning on shaming you, but think about it. For all these years, you have turned this house into a hell because of your fear and bitterness. You hit Hannah, you curse at her, you belittle my wife. Is it really because of her faults? Or is it because you can't stand the fact that you're hiding an unspeakable secret in your heart?" I stared at my husband, stunned. His words struck me like a hammer. So, it was possible that the reason for all of my mother-in-law's cruelty wasn't just that she hated me, but because some secret was eating away at her soul. Margaret collapsed into a chair, her trembling hands gripping the edge of the table. I saw her shoulders shake, and her eyes, usually so fierce, were now glistening as if she were about to cry. She looked at Ethan, her voice cracking. "You don't understand. No one can understand." Ethan took a deep breath and gently placed the journal back on the table. If you don't want me to read anymore, then you tell us yourself. Tell us the truth. Right here, in front of me and Hannah, I believe that's the only way you'll ever find peace. I was silent, my heart pounding, my eyes fixed on my mother-in-law. My mind was a sea of questions. What did that journal say? What secret had made her so afraid? Why did Ethan say it was the reason she tormented me? Margaret was silent for a long time, her face a mask of conflict between pride and helplessness. She looked up at me, her eyes softening for a moment before she quickly looked away. Finally, she let out a ragged breath, her voice choked. If I tell you, will you forgive me? Ethan answered immediately. We don't need you to beg for forgiveness, Mom. We just need the truth. His answer weighed heavily on me as well. Yes, I didn't need pity, nor did I need an apology. I just wanted to understand why she hated me so much. After a long silence, she began to speak. Her voice trembled, interspersed with choked sobs. Many years ago, before I married your father, I had a part of my life I never dared to speak of. I loved another man, but he betrayed me. He left me when I was pregnant with my first child. I was frozen. Ethan was also stunned, his hands clenched into fists. His mother continued, her eyes staring into the distance. I gave birth to that baby, but he died when he was only a few months old. It was the greatest pain of my life, a wound that never healed. From that day on, I grew to hate all women who became mothers. I was jealous of anyone who had a complete, happy family. I buried everything in that journal, so no one would ever know I had such a sordid and painful past. I told myself I had to be strong. I had to be strict. I had to make everyone respect me so no one would ever dare to look down on me again. She stopped, tears rolling down her gaunt cheeks. For the first time in my life, I saw my mother-in-law cry, not out of anger or scolding, but from a deep, profound pain. I sat there, utterly still. So, for all these years, I had endured beatings and curses simply because she had let her past pain control her, letting it fester into bitterness that she unleashed on others. I felt both pity and anger. Pity because she had once been an unhappy woman, and anger because she wasn't strong enough to overcome it, instead turning her pain into a weapon to torment those around her. Ethan took my hand, his voice low. Mom, if your past was so painful, you should have known to cherish the present. You should have loved your family more, not turned this house into a nightmare. Margaret buried her face in her hands and sobbed uncontrollably. She was no longer the cold, imperious woman, but like an abandoned child, fragile and wounded. I watched the scene, my heart in turmoil. I didn't know if I could forgive her, but I knew that from this moment on, things in this family would never be the same. The secret was out, the past was present, and no one could pretend they didn't know. The story didn't end there. Because just when it seemed everything had settled, a single sheet of paper slipped out from the journal and fluttered to the floor. Ethan bent down to pick it up, and as he unfolded it, his expression suddenly darkened. He mumbled something under his breath, and then looked up at his mother, his voice choked. Mom, this is... His mother turned pale and lunged to grab the paper, but Ethan held it tight. I watched, a chill running through my entire body. My intuition told me this wasn't just a secret from the past. It was another earth-shattering truth. A truth that could turn our present lives completely upside down. The air grew thick again, tense to the point of suffocation. I watched Ethan with trembling anticipation, waiting for him to speak. But he was silent, his eyes glued to that paper, while his mother shook uncontrollably, her face as white as a sheet, and I knew the real storm was just beginning. The thin piece of paper seemed insignificant, but as Ethan held it tightly in his hand, the entire room felt like it had frozen over. No one dared to breathe too loudly. I sat on the floor, my palms slick with sweat, while my heart pounded so hard it felt like it would burst from my chest. Ethan stared at every word, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion, and finally to a heart-wrenching pain. I had never seen his face look like that. His lips trembled, and it took him a long moment to force out a few hoarse words. Mom, why did you hide this? She immediately lunged forward, trying to snatch the paper, but Ethan stepped back, holding it high. His voice suddenly rang out, full of resolve. No, Mom, I need to hear the truth. Hannah needs to know too. I watched them struggle, trembling. I had never seen my mother-in-law so terrified. Her face was ashen, her eyes wild with panic, her trembling hands reaching out like someone about to lose everything. She screamed, "Ethan, don't read it. I forbid you." But Ethan clenched the paper, his eyes bloodshot. He took a long, deep breath and began to read. His voice was choked, and each word seemed to carve itself into my mind. Date. I don't know whether to be happy or worried. The baby in my womb is not his. It's the result of a mistake. A night when I was weak and couldn't control myself with another man. I'm terrified. I know if this truth comes out, I will lose everything. I have to pretend it never happened. The room seemed to collapse around me. My entire body went numb, as if every cell had stopped functioning. I looked at Ethan and saw his hand shaking violently, his voice breaking. So I'm not Dad's real son? Those words echoed like a clap of thunder, tearing through the sky. I was speechless, while his mother collapsed completely, tears streaming down her face. She wailed, her voice filled with desperation. It's not what you think, Ethan. I made a mistake, but I loved you with all my heart. I never treated you any differently. Ethan let out a bitter laugh, tears now flowing freely. Loved me? If you truly loved me, why did you let me live a lie for all these years? Why did you turn this house into a prison, making everyone suffer your bitterness just to cover up your own fear? I sat there, petrified, my mind racing with questions. So, Ethan wasn't the biological son of his father, the man who had passed away years ago, the man the whole town still praised as a model of integrity. Then whose son was he? And why did his mother choose to bury this secret instead of facing the truth? Margaret buried her face in her hands and sobbed, her frail body shaking. She whispered, as if to herself, I had no other choice. If I had told the truth back then, I would have been scorned for the rest of my life. You wouldn't have had a father, a decent family. I had to live a lie. Ethan cut her off, his voice choked but sharp. But that lie killed you, Mom. It killed all of us. He sank heavily into a chair, his eyes staring blankly into space. The paper slipped from his hand and fluttered to the floor. I picked it up, but before I could read more, his mother snatched it, crumpled it in her hand, and clutched it to her chest as if protecting the last thing she had left. The silence was so heavy I found it hard to breathe. I looked at Ethan, the husband I thought I knew so well, now trembling from the immense shock. I looked at his mother, the cruel woman I had once hated, now appearing as a victim of her own mistake and fear. My mind was a swirl of emotions. I pitied Ethan for having just lost the truth of his own origins. I was angry with his mother for letting the entire family live a lie for so long, but I also felt a pang of sorrow for her, because her tough exterior was just a fragile shell hiding a heart full of wounds. Ethan looked up, staring directly at his mother, his eyes bloodshot, his voice cracking. Mom, I want to know who my real father is. The question was like a knife twisting in an old wound. His mother was silent. She bit her lip so hard that a trickle of blood appeared. She shook her head violently, her voice breaking. Don't ask. I'm begging you, don't bring it up again, Ethan shouted, his voice thundering. For the first time in his life, he dared to yell at his mother. I have the right to know. For all these years, I lived believing I was the son of my deceased father, that I carried his honorable bloodline. But what now? It turns out I'm just the result of a mistake. How could you let me live in a lie like this forever? I started to cry. I had never seen Ethan in so much pain. Every word he spoke felt like it was tearing my own heart apart. His mother clutched her chest, gasping for air as if she were about to faint. She sobbed, That person is gone now. Don't ask any more. Ethan roared, Even if he's gone, you have to tell me who he was. Silence descended, broken only by choked sobs. Finally, his mother whispered, her voice so soft I had to strain to hear. It was someone you know. Both Ethan and I froze. An electric shock ran down my spine. If it was someone he knew, it meant that person had been around, had been connected to this family. So, for all these years, we had been unknowingly living in a web of layered lies. Ethan staggered to his feet, as if he had lost all his strength. He looked at me, his eyes empty, then turned back to his mother. "Mom, tell me clearly. I need the truth." His mother clenched the crumpled paper in her hand, her eyes red, her whole body shaking. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, I saw a woman who had been so cruelly domineering look so weak and helpless. The room fell into a heavy silence. I knew that if she uttered a name, everything would shatter. But she just sat there, trembling and sobbing. In that moment, I understood that the storm was not over. The secret of Ethan's biological father, if revealed, would not only turn our lives upside down but could also trigger a chain of unforeseen events. I reached for Ethan's hand, but he pulled it away, turned, and walked straight out the door without looking back. The door slammed shut, leaving a cold, empty space behind. His mother collapsed, burying her face in her hands and sobbing hysterically, while I sat there, my mind reeling, my heart filled with anxiety. I knew this was only the beginning of a real hurricane. The moment the door slammed shut, the sharp, dry sound echoed through the house, making me jump. I sat frozen, watching Ethan's back disappear, a vague sense of dread washing over me. He had walked away in a blind rage, taking with him a faith that had been violently shaken. My gentle, quiet husband had never raised his voice to his mother, but tonight he had screamed like a man who had just had everything stolen from him. Margaret remained slumped on the floor, clutching the crumpled paper in her trembling hand, her face streaked with tears. I no longer recognized her. The woman who was usually so imperious, so cruel, so determined to impose her will on others, now looked like nothing more than a frail, helpless, broken old woman. She kept muttering incoherent words, as if speaking to the past, as if begging for her own forgiveness. I shakily walked over to her, wanting to say something, but my throat was tight. Half of me wanted to lash out, to unleash all the anger I felt for the years of her torment. But the other half felt a pang of pity, a sense of compassion for a woman who was losing all control in the face of the secrets she herself had buried. "Tell him, Mom." My voice came out weak. "Whatever the truth is, at least tell him so Ethan doesn't have to torture himself into madness like this." She looked up, her bloodshot eyes staring at me, as if looking right through me. "You don't understand, Hannah. If I tell him, it won't just be Ethan, this whole family will be buried in shame. I'd rather take this secret to my grave." She paused, her voice choked with emotion. I froze, more bewildered than ever. Who was this man from her past that she was so terrified of? At that moment, I heard Ethan's quick footsteps outside, fading into the distance. I couldn't stop myself. I ran after him. The night was pitch black, and the wind was cold and biting. Ethan was stumbling along like a man who had lost his way. I called out, "Ethan, wait." He didn't turn around. His broad shoulders were shaking, his hands clenched into fists, as if trying to suppress a storm raging inside him. I ran and finally caught his arm. "Ethan, please, calm down. I know you're in shock, but if you just run off like this, we'll lose control of everything." He stopped and slowly turned to face me. His face was pale, his eyes wet with tears, red from anger and despair. He looked at me, his voice a low, raspy whisper. "Do you have any idea what it feels like to find out your whole life has been a lie? Hannah, I was so proud to be my father's son. I tried to live honorably, to uphold his good name, and now I find out I'm just the result of a mistake. I can't breathe." I squeezed his hand tightly, tears of my own falling. "I understand your pain. But Ethan, no matter what the truth is, you are still you. The man I love, my husband, the future father of our children. Blood doesn't define everything." He let out a bitter, choked laugh. "But I need to know who I am, Hannah. If I don't, I'll never be at peace." I fell silent. I knew he was right. A person can't live forever in ambiguity, but I was also afraid. Afraid that the truth would be too much for us to bear. Ethan pulled his hand away and took a few more steps before turning back, his eyes sharp and cold. "I will find out the truth. If Mom won't tell me, I'll find it myself." His words were filled with determination. I saw a clear change in him. He was no longer the meek Ethan of before, but a man pushed to the brink, forced to stand up against both the past and the oppression he had lived under. That night, Ethan left and didn't come back. I sat on the porch, my heart heavy with unease. Inside, his mother sat in silence, her eyes vacant. I had never felt this house to be so cold. The next morning, Ethan hadn't returned. I called his phone, but he didn't answer. I was beside myself with worry. As the morning sun streamed in, I saw his mother emerge from her room, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken. "Where did he go?" she whispered. My voice was choked. "I don't know, but I'm afraid if this continues, Ethan will only hurt himself more. Mom, if you truly love him, please tell him the truth." She remained silent, but as I turned away, I caught a flicker of fear in her eyes, as if she knew where Ethan might be able to find a clue. That afternoon, I received a text from Ethan. "I'm going to see Uncle David. Don't call me." I froze. Uncle David, his father's younger brother, the brother of the man Ethan had thought was his father his whole life. He lived not far away, a man who rarely visited, but still kept a few family heirlooms. Why was Ethan going to see Uncle David? My intuition told me that he had either found another detail in the journal or recalled a clue he had once heard in passing. That evening, I went to Uncle David's house. The old wooden gate was slightly ajar. A weak yellow light shone from within. I could hear Ethan's voice, tense and strained. "You have to tell me, Uncle. I have the right to know who my real father is." Uncle David's voice was low, tinged with hesitation. "Ethan, this isn't simple. I know part of it, but if I tell you, it could tear this family apart." I held my breath outside the door, my heart pounding. I heard Ethan press him, his voice tight. "I don't care if the family is torn apart. I just need the truth." At that moment, I heard a chair scrape loudly against the floor. I thought Ethan was about to leave, but then Uncle David sighed heavily. "All right. If you really want to know, your real father is." I strained to hear, but the name was drowned out by the sudden, loud barking of a dog outside. I jumped, and before I could recover, I heard Ethan scream from inside. "No, it can't be." The sound of a fist slamming on a table reverberated. My body went rigid. I wanted to rush in, but my feet felt like lead. What name had just been spoken that made Ethan scream like a man who had lost his mind? The door burst open, and Ethan stormed out, his face white, his eyes wild with horror. He didn't see me. He just rushed past, leaving Uncle David standing in the house, sighing in helpless resignation. I ran after him, grabbing his arm, but he shook me off, his voice raw. "Hannah, don't ask me anything. This truth is too horrible. I don't know what to do anymore." He disappeared into the night, leaving me standing there, trembling, my heart racing. I knew everything was spinning out of control. And that truth, that name, might be the biggest nightmare of our lives. That night, I returned home with a heavy heart. Ethan's silhouette had vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a chilling emptiness that felt terrifying. Margaret was still sitting there, the yellow light casting shadows on her aged, sunken face, her eyes raw and swollen, as if she had cried herself dry. I sat down beside her, not knowing how to begin. A torrent of questions flooded my mind, but they all seemed meaningless as long as she chose to remain silent. "Where's Ethan?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling. I paused for a moment before answering. "He just saw Uncle David." As soon as the words left my mouth, Margaret flinched, her eyes widening in terror. Her hands shook so violently that the glass she was holding slipped and shattered on the floor. Her voice was a panicked whisper. "He met David? What does he know?" I looked at my mother-in-law, my throat tightening. Her reaction only confirmed that Uncle David knew much more than I had imagined. I pressed her. "Mom, who is Ethan's real father? Could it be Uncle David?" "Be quiet," she screamed, as if terrified I would utter an unspeakable name. Then she buried her head in her hands and whispered deliriously, "No, it can't get out. If Ethan knows everything, he'll hate me for the rest of his life. This whole family will be destroyed." I went still. Her words only made me more confused. A new fear began to creep into my heart. Was it possible that this truth was directly connected to our closest relatives, that it even touched the very honor of the family name. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Ethan still hadn't come home. His phone was off. I felt like I was sitting on pins and needles, terrified that in his despair, he might do something reckless. The next morning, I rushed to Uncle David's house. The door was still slightly ajar. This time, I didn't knock. I walked straight inside. Uncle David was sitting there, his face weary, his eyes bloodshot from a sleepless night. When he saw me, he sighed and said slowly, "You're here, Hannah. I knew you'd come asking sooner or later." I sat down, my voice choked with emotion. "Uncle, please, you have to tell me the truth. What did Ethan hear from you last night?" He was so shocked, he just left. "I'm afraid he can't handle it." He was silent for a long time, then he pulled a faded photograph from a drawer. He placed it on the table. In the photo was a tall, slender young man, with a face that bore a striking resemblance to Ethan. I gasped. "Who is this, Uncle?" he said softly. This man's name was Arthur. He was my brother, but he wasn't Ethan's father. Arthur was the man your mother-in-law was involved with. My heart lurched, my eyes widened. I stared at the photograph, stunned. So, Ethan's biological father was his adoptive father's own brother, Arthur, the man who had died many years ago. This meant Ethan was born out of a tragic and tangled predicament, the son of a forbidden love between his mother and his husband's brother. I stammered, "So, that means Ethan is both a son and a nephew in this family." Uncle David nodded, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "Yes. It's a cruel truth, but it can't be denied." Back then, Margaret and my brother Arthur had a moment of weakness, and she became pregnant. At the time, Arthur was already engaged to be married. If the story got out, the entire family would have been shamed. So, she had to hide it and let Ethan be known as the son of her husband, Frank. I was speechless. My hands were ice cold. Ethan's words from the previous night echoed in my head. It can't be. Now I understood why he was so horrified. Because that truth was too cruel, too devastating. I bit my lip, tears streaming down my face. "Why didn't you say something sooner? Why hide it for all these years?" Uncle David sighed, his eyes filled with pain. "Because it was the family's shame. I love Ethan too. I didn't want him to live his whole life with that burden. But now he knows, and I'm afraid he won't be able to overcome it." I shakily stood up, my mind in turmoil. I knew Ethan was out there somewhere, wrestling with this brutal reality. If he didn't have support, if he had no one by his side, he might break completely. I had to find him, no matter what. After leaving Uncle David's house, I called everywhere, but still couldn't reach Ethan. I asked his friends, his colleagues, no one knew where he was. As night fell, I was on the verge of despair when I suddenly received a text from an unknown number. "Hannah, if you want to find your husband, go to the old bridge by the river. Hurry. Don't be late." I was terrified, my heart pounding. Without a second thought, I bolted out the door, running as fast as I could to the old bridge where Ethan and I used to have our dates when we first fell in love. The night was pitch black, the wind howled, and the sound of the river lapping against the bank was chilling. From a distance, I saw a familiar figure standing silently on the railing of the bridge, his broad shoulders trembling slightly. It was Ethan. "Ethan!" I screamed, my voice cracking. He turned around. His face was gaunt, his eyes red and wild. He gave a weak, bitter smile that broke my heart. "You came too?" I ran to him and grabbed his hand tightly, terrified he would do something foolish. "Are you crazy? Don't scare me like this." He pulled his hand away, his gaze distant. "Hannah, you know, don't you? You know who I am now, don't you?" I threw my arms around him, sobbing. "I know, but I don't care. No matter what, you're still Ethan. You're my husband." He let out a choked laugh. "But I care. I can't live with the truth that I'm the result of an incestuous mistake. I feel dirty, unworthy of you." I shook my head, screaming, "No, Ethan, don't destroy yourself like this. It's not your fault. You didn't choose how you were born, but you have the right to choose how you live. You're still a good husband, a dutiful son. Don't let your mother's past kill our future." Ethan's own tears began to fall. He trembled and held me tightly, as if clinging to his last lifeline. We stood there together, letting the wind whip around us, letting the river rush below, our hearts still shaking. But as I looked up, I caught a glimpse of a figure lurking at the end of the bridge, their sharp eyes fixed on us. Before I could get a clear look, the figure vanished into the darkness. A cold chill ran down my spine. Who sent that text message? Who was watching us? While Ethan was still burying his face in my shoulder, I suddenly understood that this cruel truth was not the end of the story. There was still another hand, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, trying to push us deeper into the abyss. That night, after pulling Ethan back from the edge of despair, I helped him home. He didn't speak. His eyes were red and hollow, his face gaunt, his breathing heavy as if he had just survived a storm in his soul. I, too, was silent, just holding his hand tightly, afraid that if I let go, he would disappear forever. When we got home, his mother was still sitting in the dark, a frail figure. Seeing Ethan return, we rushed towards him, but he coldly sidestepped her, his eyes filled with resentment. He didn't say a word, just walked straight up to his room. The door slammed shut, leaving his mother stunned, her hands hanging limply at her sides. I saw her shoulders shake, her eyes following her son, filled with a helpless pain. I walked over to her and said softly, "Mom, things have come to this. Hiding will only make Ethan more resentful. The person who needs to tell him the truth is you, no one else." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Hannah, you don't understand. If he knows everything, he will see me as a sinner for the rest of his life. I'd rather he hate me for being cruel than know I betrayed the whole family, that I created a stain that can never be washed away." I sighed. I understood her fear, but I also knew that the truth, sooner or later, would come out, especially now that an anonymous person was sending me text messages, leading me to the old bridge. That person knew Ethan's state of mind, knew this family's secret. So who were they, and why did they want to interfere? That question haunted me all night. I barely slept. By morning, I had decided I had to find the person lurking in the shadows. Around noon, when Ethan was out, I opened my phone again and searched through my messages. The unknown number had no information attached, just the simple text, "Hannah, if you want to find your husband, go to the old bridge by the river. Hurry, don't be late." I tried calling back, but the number was always unreachable. A sense of unease grew within me. I recalled the shadowy figure at the end of the bridge last night, those sharp eyes, watching our every move. They must have intentionally let me see them, as if to remind me that we were being watched. That afternoon, I went to see Uncle David again. As soon as he saw me, he frowned. "You're here again, Hannah." I looked him straight in the eye. "Uncle, who told me Ethan was at the old bridge yesterday? Who knows this story well enough to interfere like this?" He flinched slightly, then shook his head. "I don't know. But Hannah, you have to be careful. This is no longer just a family secret. If someone else is involved, it means an outsider knows the truth from back then." I felt a jolt. "You mean that person could be a witness from all those years ago?" Uncle David didn't answer, just sighed heavily. I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, as if he also knew something but didn't dare to say it. That evening, Ethan came home late. His face was cold, his eyes dry. He didn't eat or speak to anyone, just sat quietly in a corner, smoking. My heart ached for him. I tried to sit beside him. "Honey, I know this is unbelievably cruel, but please don't torture yourself anymore. You're still my husband, still the Ethan I love." He turned to look at me, his eyes bottomless pits of sorrow. "Hannah, do you know who sent you that text last night?" I froze. I couldn't hide it from him. I told him about the figure on the bridge. After listening, he clenched his fists, his voice tight with anger. "So someone is watching us. They know the truth, and they're deliberately dragging us into this vortex." I trembled. "But what do they want from us?" Ethan looked at me, his eyes darkening. "Maybe they want us to know the whole truth. Or maybe they want to use it to destroy this family completely." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring out into the endless darkness. I saw his thin, lonely silhouette, and my heart ached. I knew that from this moment on, he would not let the past remain buried. The next morning, Ethan decided to investigate on his own. He told me, if Mom won't talk, I'll find the people who lived near our family back then. They might know something. I can't live in this darkness anymore. I nodded, knowing I couldn't stop him, but my heart was heavy. I was afraid that the deeper we dug, the more terrifying truths we would face. 3 days later, Ethan returned, his face haggard. He sat down in front of me and handed me an old letter, the paper yellowed with age. He said, "I found this among Uncle David's old things. It was written by Arthur before he died." I shakily opened the letter. The handwriting was messy but clear. "Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm probably already gone. I know I was wrong. I didn't deserve the love you gave me, and I certainly didn't deserve the child you carry. But believe me, I truly loved you, even if that love was wrong. If there's a next life, I promise to atone for all my sins. Please, forgive me." I was speechless. Ethan gave a bitter smile, a tear rolling down his cheek. "So it's true. I'm the result of a forbidden love." I hugged him tightly, sobbing, "But you're not to blame. You didn't choose to be born." He held me, trembling, but his eyes suddenly sharpened. "Hannah, did you notice? This letter isn't just a confession. There's a strange detail. If there's a next life, I promise to atone for all my sins." It's as if he sensed someone else knew, and that person wouldn't let it go. I froze. Ethan's words made me think of the figure on the bridge. Could it be that this mysterious person was the one who knew the whole story back then and had now returned to either collect a debt or expose the truth in the most cruel way possible? Just then, my phone buzzed with a new message from the same unknown number. "You think you know the whole truth? Not even close. There's one more thing, enough to make your entire family hang their heads in shame. If you want to know, come to the abandoned farmhouse at the end of the lane tomorrow night. Alone." I shuddered, goosebumps covering my skin. This message was clearly aimed at me. But why me, and not Ethan or his mother? What did this person ultimately want? I showed the message to Ethan. His eyes flashed with anger and determination. "We have to go. I won't let anyone control my life from the shadows anymore." I held his hand tightly. I knew that tomorrow night would be a major turning point. Another truth, perhaps even more terrifying, was waiting for us at that abandoned farmhouse. The next night, the sky was overcast, as if conspiring with the heavy dread in my heart. A light drizzle began to fall, each cold drop pricking my skin. I held Ethan's hand tightly, half wanting to go and half wanting to turn back. The abandoned farmhouse at the end of the lane had long been neglected, its walls covered in moss, its wooden door rotting. The local kids often whispered that it was haunted, but now I knew that what awaited us inside was not a ghost, but a person of flesh and blood, the keeper of my family's deepest secret. Ethan walked in silence, each step as heavy as a stone. I stayed close beside him, my heart pounding, my mind racing with questions. Who was the person sending the messages? How did they know so much about my family? And what was this final secret that would make us all hang our heads in shame? We stopped in front of the farmhouse's dilapidated door. Inside, it was pitch black, with only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracks in the walls. Ethan gave the door a light push, and it swung open with a long, eerie creak. A musty smell hit us immediately. I shivered and clung to Ethan's arm. The flashlight from his phone cast a beam on the walls, revealing splotchy stains and peeling paint. "Who's there?" Ethan's voice was low and steady. A figure emerged from a dark corner. Tall and thin, wearing an old raincoat, his face was hidden in the shadows, and I couldn't recognize him at first. But when he looked up, I was stunned. It was Mr. Peterson, the elderly neighbor, who lived a few houses down, the one who often stopped to chat with my mother-in-law. "It's you," I gasped, my eyes wide. Mr. Peterson smirked, a bitter, triumphant smile. "That's right. It's me. You two got here quickly." Ethan clenched his fists, his eyes blazing. "You're the one who sent my wife those messages. What are you planning, mister?" Peterson calmly walked closer, his shoes crunching on the broken tiles. His voice was a low, raspy drawl. "I just want the truth to be told. For all these years, Margaret has lived a lie, pretending to be so righteous, while her past is a stain that can never be washed clean. I saw it all, but I kept quiet. I don't want to be quiet anymore. I shook as I pressed him, but why now? Why choose to drag my entire family into the abyss? He scoffed, his eyes glinting with resentment. Because I've had enough. Years ago, it was Margaret who used her cunning to bury everything, turning me into a coward who didn't dare to speak up. Little did she know, I was the one who knew everything from the start. I knew who she was with that night. I knew whose child was in her belly. And I know another truth that even she has never told you. Ethan roared and took a step forward. Spit it out! Mr. Peterson, unhurried, pulled a worn envelope from his raincoat pocket and placed it on a rickety table in the middle of the room. This is a letter Margaret wrote to Arthur, but never sent. I found it when I was cleaning out Arthur's storage unit after he passed. I watched Ethan with trembling apprehension. He hastily opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. The handwriting was clearly his mother's, familiar down to every stroke. Ethan read, his voice cracking. Arthur, that night was my fault, but in my heart, I never saw it as a mistake. I love you, a love I can never acknowledge. The child in my belly, I know for certain is yours, but I must let him bear Frank's name so that you and I can keep this secret our whole lives. Rest assured, no one will ever know. I would rather bear the world's scorn for the rest of my life than let the truth be exposed. By the time he finished, Ethan's hand was shaking so hard the letter fell to the floor. He looked as if he had lost all his strength, collapsing into a chair, his face ashen. I rushed to his side, tears streaming down my face, but Mr. Peterson wasn't finished. He lowered his voice, his tone chilling. That's only half of it. The other truth is that she was originally going to get rid of that pregnancy. I was the one who knew, and I stopped her. I told her, the child is innocent. If you get rid of it, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And that's why Ethan was born, but she never dared to tell this truth. She was afraid Ethan would hate her forever. Ethan shot up from his chair, screaming, his eyes red and wild. My mother was going to abort me? Mr. Peterson nodded, his gaze like ice. That's right. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't exist. Think about it. How are you supposed to live your life knowing your own mother wanted to throw you away? The room started to spin. I grabbed onto Ethan as he staggered and nearly fell. His face was contorted in pain, and he mumbled, "No, it can't be." I looked at Mr. Peterson, my voice choked. Why would you do this? Why did you have to dig everything up? Mr. Peterson narrowed his eyes and gave a cold laugh. Because the truth needs to be exposed, because I want Margaret to pay. And also, because I want Ethan to be grateful to me. If it weren't for me, he wouldn't be on this earth. Ethan broke free from my grasp and stared at Mr. Peterson, his voice strangled. You saved me? No, you turned my life into a tragedy. If you had just let things end back then, I wouldn't have to live in this hell. He lunged forward, about to grab Mr. Peterson by the collar, but I managed to hold him back. I saw the madness in his eyes, the overflowing hatred. Mr. Peterson stepped back, still calm. Hate whoever you want, but that's the truth. Now you know everything. With that, he turned and walked out of the abandoned farmhouse, leaving us to collapse in the thick, oppressive darkness. Ethan let out a heart-wrenching scream. Why me? Why do I have to bear all of their sins and mistakes? I held him, my tears falling like rain. In my heart, I knew this was only the beginning, because this cruel truth wouldn't stop here, and Mr. Peterson's hand had certainly not yet been played. The darkness enveloped us, leaving only the two of us clinging to each other in the decaying house. Outside, the rain continued to fall, each drop like a cold blade against the skin. I knew that from now on, every step we took would only be more precarious. That night, I helped Ethan back home. His steps were heavy, his eyes vacant, devoid of any light. Each movement seemed to drag a sky full of darkness behind him. I didn't dare say a word, afraid that a single utterance would cause the pain inside him to erupt like a dormant volcano. When we arrived, his mother was still sitting in the living room, a frail figure in the dim light, her face gaunt, her eyes sunken and dark. Seeing us enter, she scrambled to her feet, her lips trembling. "Ethan, you're back." Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of fury and a pain so deep it seemed unbreachable. He threw the crumpled letter onto the table. "Mom, what is this?" His voice was hoarse, shaking but sharp as ice. "Why did you write this to Arthur? Why did you confess that the baby in your womb was his?" His mother's face went white, her lips trembling, unable to form words. She looked at the letter, then at Ethan, tears welling up in her eyes. "Ethan, I beg you, don't make me say any more." Ethan roared, his voice thundering through the room like a crack of thunder. "I don't need you to beg, I need the truth. Tell me, is it true that from the beginning, you never wanted me to exist? Is it true that Mr. Peterson was the one who stopped you from getting an abortion?" Hearing this, I saw his mother's entire body tremble so violently she looked like she would collapse. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed, no longer having the strength to hide. "Yes," she cried, her voice choked. "It's true I was going to get rid of you. I was so scared. I didn't know how to face our family, our relatives, the world. If I kept you, I would have lost everything. But then Mr. Peterson found out. He stopped me. He said the child was innocent, that he deserved to live, and so you were born." Ethan staggered back a step as if he'd been struck by lightning. I rushed to steady him, but he pushed my hand away, his eyes filled with bitterness. "So I'm alive today not because of my mother's love, but because of a stranger's pity. Mom, do you know how worthless and filthy that makes me feel?" She sobbed and fell to her knees. "No, Ethan, no matter what, I still love you. I raised you. I wanted you to have everything. Don't say I didn't love you." Ethan turned away, his face a cold mask. "Your love was just a way to atone for your guilt. I don't need it." With that, he walked straight up to his room and slammed the door. I watched him go, my heart clenching in pain. The house was filled with the sound of his mother's broken sobs and the heavy, resentful silence from behind Ethan's door. I sat down beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, you should have told him from the beginning. The longer you hide the truth, the deeper the wound gets." She shook her head, tears streaming. "I was afraid, Hannah. I was afraid my whole life would fall apart. I was afraid of being scorned by the world. And now, I've lost everything anyway." I was silent. I had no words of comfort left. For the next few days, Ethan lived like a shadow. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He neglected his work and just stayed locked in his room. I would knock, but he wouldn't open. I'd bring him food, and he'd eat only a little, his eyes lost. It was like watching my heart get torn to pieces, but I didn't know how to pull him out of that deep pit of despair. While my family was in crisis, Mr. Peterson started showing up more often. He would come into our house uninvited, sit and talk to my mother-in-law, his eyes gleaming with the triumph of someone holding the power of life and death. "Margaret," he'd say in a cold tone, "did you think you could hide it forever? Now even Ethan knows. I advise you to be sensible, or I might just let a few other details slip. Then no one in this town will be able to look you in the eye again." My mother-in-law would just bow her head, silent. I looked at him, a suspicion growing in my mind. This man clearly wanted more than just the truth to be revealed. There was ambition in his eyes, a calculated plan. One day, I gathered all my courage and asked him directly, "What do you really want? If you just wanted revenge, you've done enough. But I can see you have other intentions." Mr. Peterson smirked and glanced at me. "You're a smart one. I don't need money. I don't need fame. I just want Ethan to acknowledge that if it weren't for me, he wouldn't exist. I want him to be indebted to me, to see me as his lifelong benefactor." I was stunned. How could a person be so cruel? He didn't want material gain, but he wanted to possess Ethan's mind, to turn him into a man forever grateful, forever burdened. That night, I tried to talk to Ethan. I knocked on his door, waiting a long time before he finally opened it. The room was dark, thick with the smell of cigarette smoke. He was sitting there, his eyes sunken, his face exhausted. "Ethan," my voice was choked, "please don't let Mr. Peterson control your life. You don't owe him anything. If it weren't for him, maybe you wouldn't have been born, but you are not at fault. You didn't choose how you were born, And you don't have to be indebted to a man who is using you. He looked up, his eyes red. But don't you understand, Hannah? My very existence is because of him. If it weren't for him, I would have been thrown away like trash. I feel like I have no value. I threw my arms around him, tears streaming down my face. You're wrong. A person's value isn't determined by how they were born, but by how they have lived. You are a good husband, a kind man. That is your true value. He trembled in my arms, but his eyes were still lost. I knew he hadn't escaped the grip of guilt and that haunting obsession. The next day, Mr. Peterson came again. But this time, he didn't just speak to my mother-in-law. He said it openly in front of both me and Ethan. Ethan, you should remember, if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be on this earth. From now on, you should treat me like a father, like a benefactor. I don't ask for much, just that you know your place. Ethan clenched his fists, his eyes blazing. I saw him shaking with rage, with humiliation. I was afraid he would lose control and attack the man. And just then, his mother suddenly fell to her knees in front of Mr. Peterson, her voice strangled. I'm begging you. Don't force my son anymore. Whatever you want from me, just say it. I watched the scene, stunned. The woman who had been so cruelly arrogant was now kneeling before Mr. Peterson, ready to endure any shame to protect her son. Mr. Peterson let out a cold laugh. Good. You're finally starting to understand. I'll tell you my terms. The air grew thick again. Ethan and I both stared at him, waiting for the words to come. My intuition told me that these terms would be the turning point that would push our family into a new, inescapable crisis. The air in the room was so thick, it was hard to breathe. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to echo, counting down to a final judgment. My mother-in-law knelt on the floor, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. Ethan stood beside her, his body rigid, his fists clenched so tightly his knuckles were white. I was caught in the middle, my heart pounding, sensing that the condition Mr. Peterson was about to announce would be a fatal blow to our family. Mr. Peterson smirked, his eyes glinting with triumph. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, the white smoke curling around his face, before he finally spoke. I don't need money, and I don't need fame. What I need is acknowledgement. He paused, looking straight at Ethan, his gaze as sharp as a knife. From now on, you will treat me as your father. You will publicly announce to everyone in this town that if it weren't for me, you would not exist. You will live your life grateful to me, respecting me as you would the man who gave you life. His words landed like a thunderclap. I was speechless, and Ethan looked as if he had been slapped across the face. He roared, his eyes bloodshot. You're insane. You are nothing to me that I should call you father. Whoever my father was, it will never be you. Mr. Peterson didn't get angry, just scoffed. Is that so? In that case, I will let this entire town know that your mother had an affair with her brother-in-law and almost aborted the child in her womb. I will tell everyone, so they can scorn her, so you will have to live with your head hung in shame for the rest of your life. My mother-in-law looked up, wailing. Don't. Whatever you want from me, just say it. Please, don't torture my son. Mr. Peterson glanced at her, his voice dripping with contempt. You think you can bear this for him? No. I want him to be the one to suffer. I want him to be indebted to me so that every time he looks in the mirror, he has to remember me. That is the price of the truth. Ethan trembled, lunging forward to punch him, but I managed to throw my arms around him. Ethan, calm down. If you hit him, he'll have even more reason to destroy us. He was breathing heavily, his eyes blazing, but he eventually collapsed into a chair, defeated. I heard him whisper, his voice choked. How can a person be so evil? Mr. Peterson stubbed out his cigarette on the floor and stood up, looking down at us like a benefactor. I don't need an answer right away. In 1 week, I want Ethan to come to me, kneel, and call me father. If not, I won't hesitate to let this entire town be rocked by your filthy truth. With that, he turned and left, leaving behind a house filled with tears and suffocating resentment. After he was gone, a dead silence fell over our home. My mother-in-law sat on the floor, sobbing, her voice hoarse. It's all my fault. If it weren't for my mistake all those years ago, this wouldn't be happening. I've ruined you, my son. Ethan didn't look at her. He just sat there silently, his eyes empty. I took his hand, feeling how cold it was, as if all life had been drained from it. I said, my voice choked, Ethan, you can't give in to him. He doesn't deserve to be called your father. He turned to look at me, his eyes red. But if I don't, he'll expose everything. Can you handle that? When you walk down the street and people are laughing and pointing, calling you the daughter-in-law of a shameful family. And Mom, can she handle being scorned by the entire town? I bit my lip, tears streaming down my face. I understood the conflict tearing him apart. On one side was his honor. On the other, his family. Either choice was agonizing. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring out, his eyes sunken. I quietly hugged him from behind, feeling him tremble. I knew a fierce battle was raging inside him. Hatred, humiliation, and fear for his mother. The next morning, the rumors began to spread. When I went to the market, I could hear whispers. I heard something scandalous is going on at the Miller's house. Something about Ethan, but who knows if it's true. I was terrified, my heart pounding. Clearly, Mr. Peterson had started his campaign. He wanted to apply pressure, to push Ethan and his mother into a corner. When I got home, Ethan was sitting on the porch, his eyes red. He looked at me, his voice hoarse. You heard, didn't you? He's already started. I don't know how much longer I can take this. I squeezed his hand. We have to face this, Ethan. We can't let him control us forever. If the truth has to come out, then let it. You are not at fault. He shook his head, his eyes dark. But Mom is. She won't be able to bear it. We looked inside, where his mother was sitting quietly, her hair streaked with more gray, her eyes vacant. My heart ached. The woman who had been so iron-willed was now just the shadow of a sinner. That afternoon, Uncle David unexpectedly showed up. He came in, his face worried, and said quickly, I've been hearing things. Mr. Peterson, he doesn't just want recognition, he wants this house. Both Ethan and I were stunned. Uncle David sighed. He once suggested to me that if Margaret was willing to sign the house over to him, he would keep quiet. But she refused. So now he's pressuring Ethan. He wants both the house and the recognition. Ethan roared, clenching his fists. He's that greedy? I saw fire in his eyes, but also helplessness. On one side was their home. On the other, a shameful truth. The price for either was too high. Uncle David looked at us, his tone serious. You two have to be careful. He won't just stop at words. If you're not careful, he will bankrupt this entire family. With that, he left, leaving us sitting there, stunned. I took Ethan's hand and whispered, we have to think of a way. We can't let him keep doing this. Ethan nodded, a determined glint in his eyes. I won't let him take everything. If he wants to drag this family through the mud, I will stand up and stop him. I looked into his eyes and saw his resolve. I knew Ethan had changed. He was no longer the meek man he used to be. But I also understood that this battle would be more brutal than anything we had ever faced. Outside, the sky darkened, and the wind howled through the trees, a sound like a challenge. I squeezed my husband's hand, my own heart trembling with fear, but also with a fragile hope that no matter what, we would face it together. The 1-week deadline Mr. Peterson had given was approaching. The fear inside me grew with each passing day. Would Ethan submit, kneel, and call that man father in exchange for silence, or would he stand tall and accept the entire town's scorn? I knew the answer would be the fateful turning point of our lives. That week passed in a heavy, suffocating silence. Every day felt like I was sitting on pins and needles. I watched Ethan grow more gaunt and haggard, his eyes constantly red from lack of sleep. He barely spoke, just sat quietly, occasionally smoking a cigarette, the white smoke swirling around his once gentle face, now etched with anguish. My mother-in-law was like a ghost, with no energy left to scold or command. She moved silently through the house, her eyes vacant, sometimes looking at Ethan and bursting into quiet, desperate tears. I knew she was living in torment and fear, both loving her son and terrified of the truth being exposed. And then, the fateful day arrived. Early that morning, A commotion erupted at the end of our lane. People were whispering that something big was going to happen at Margaret's house today. Curious eyes and hushed voices followed us everywhere. Clearly, Mr. Peterson had planned this, deliberately turning this day into a public execution. Before we could even prepare ourselves, Mr. Peterson, accompanied by a few of his close neighbors, strode into our yard, a smug look on his face. He intentionally spoke loudly enough for everyone around to hear. "Today is the day I want to see some sense from Ethan. If he's obedient and calls me father in front of all you good people, then this whole affair will end right here. If not, don't blame me for exposing the filthy truth from all those years ago." A wave of murmurs immediately swept through the crowd. Dozens of eyes turned to us, a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. I squeezed Ethan's hand, feeling it cold and trembling. Ethan stepped into the center of the yard, his eyes fixed on Mr. Peterson, as sharp as a blade. The tension was so thick that the crowd held its breath. "You want me to kneel and call you father?" Ethan's voice was low and hoarse, but it carried across the yard. Mr. Peterson smirked. "That's right. Just one word. In return, I'll keep silent. Your mother won't be cursed by the entire town, and you won't have to live in shame. If not, I'll tell everyone everything, and this entire family will never be able to hold their heads up again." The crowd grew restless, with some whispering, "What's going on? Why does he have to call him father? Is it possible Ethan isn't Frank's real son?" I felt goosebumps all over my body. Clearly, Mr. Peterson had calculated this perfectly. The moment Ethan refused, he would unleash the truth, and our family would bear the full force of public condemnation. My mother-in-law cried out and grabbed Ethan's arm. "Son, for my sake, just endure this humiliation once, just this once, and it will all be over." Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes filled with pain. My heart ached for him. He turned to look at me, his eyes asking, "What should I do?" I held his hand tightly and shook my head. I knew that if he knelt today, he would never be able to look himself in the mirror again. The air was thick. The yard was packed with people, all holding their breath. Mr. Peterson stood with his arms crossed, a triumphant look on his face, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. And then Ethan's voice rang out, firm and clear. "I will never call you my father." The words were like a lightning strike. The crowd gasped. Mr. Peterson was momentarily stunned. Then he burst out laughing, a high-pitched, mocking sound. "Fine, fine! In that case, listen up, all of you. This Ethan here is not Frank's biological son. He is the result of a filthy affair between his mother and her brother-in-law." An explosion of murmurs erupted. People stared, their mouths agape. Some covered their mouths in shock. Others shook their heads in disgust. The sound of whispers rose like a swarm of angry bees. "Oh my God, so that's what it was. No wonder Margaret has been so bitter all these years. What a disgrace." My mother-in-law clutched her chest and collapsed, crying hysterically. I rushed to her side, my own heart feeling like it was being torn apart. Ethan stood motionless, his face pale, but his eyes were blazing. He held his head high, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. "Yes, I am not Frank's biological son. I am the result of a mistake. But I did not choose how I was born. I am not at fault." The crowd fell silent. No one had expected Ethan to stand up and say it so boldly. He continued, his voice trembling but resolute. "I have lived an honest life. I have worked hard. I have never harmed anyone. My mother's shame is a fact, but it is not my fault. If you want to scorn me for what I do, not for how I was born." A moment of silence hung in the air. I saw many people's expressions shift. A few looked down, seemingly ashamed. Mr. Peterson's face darkened. He shouted, "You're good with words, but you think that's enough to wash away this filth? For the rest of your life, people will point at you and despise you." Ethan turned to him, his eyes like fire. "I would rather hold my head high and live with the truth than bow my head and kneel to a petty man like you." His defiant words seemed to tear through the oppressive gloom. The crowd murmured again, but this time, the tone was different. "He's right, you know. That boy has been a good, quiet man for years. It's not his fault." Mr. Peterson saw the tide turning. His face turned red with rage. his eyes filled with fury. He pointed a finger at Ethan and snarled, "You will pay for this. I won't let you get away with it." With that, he stormed off, leaving behind a yard full of unending whispers. My mother-in-law was sobbing in my arms. "Ethan, my son, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault." Ethan walked over, his eyes still wet with tears. He bent down and took his mother's wrinkled hand, his voice choked. "Mom, I have hated you, but I still can't abandon you. I will live with my head held high to prove that I am not a stain." Then he turned to the crowd and bowed his head. "If you despise me, I will accept it. But please, let me live by my own hard work and decency." No one said anything. There was only the sound of the wind and the eyes of the crowd following Ethan, no longer with just curiosity, but with a flicker of respect. I took my husband's hand, my heart overflowing with emotion. I knew that in this moment, Ethan had chosen the hardest path to live with the truth, no matter the cost. But I believed that it was this very pride that would prevent Mr. Peterson from easily achieving his goal. However, I also knew he wouldn't stop. Mr. Peterson's shadow would still loom over us, and this battle had only just begun. After that fateful morning, the town buzzed with gossip. The news spread like wildfire. People gathered on street corners to talk about my family, about my mother-in-law, about Ethan. Some shook their heads in pity, others smirked with contempt, but a few looked at Ethan with a strange new respect, because he had dared to face the truth head-on. However, I knew that Mr. Peterson would not let it go so easily. He was not a man who accepted defeat. He was used to holding power, to seeing others tremble before him. Being publicly defied and exposed by Ethan would surely drive him to retaliate, perhaps even more viciously. That afternoon, just as I feared, a group of officials from the township office came to our house, carrying documents, their faces grim. They said that there had been a complaint filed regarding a land dispute and that they needed to verify ownership of our property. My mother-in-law froze, her face turning ashen. Ethan and I exchanged a look, our hearts pounding. This was clearly Mr. Peterson's doing. Unable to win with words, he was now using power and the law to corner us. After they left, Ethan slammed his fist on the table, his eyes blazing. "He's really trying to take the house." My mother-in-law collapsed into a chair, crying, her voice trembling. "Oh God, this house is all I have. If I lose it, I'll have nothing left." I sat down beside her and squeezed her hand. "Mom, we won't let him get his way." But even as I said it, I was filled with worry. Mr. Peterson was well-connected and cunning. What did we, alone, have to fight him with? In the days that followed, Ethan began to change. He no longer hid in his dark room, no longer stared out the window like a lost soul. He threw himself into researching property records, talking to the oldest residents in town, searching for witnesses to prove our family's ownership. I watched him with a mixture of worry and love. He grew thinner, the circles under his eyes deepened, but his eyes burned with a fierce determination. One evening, he sat beside me, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Hannah, I can't let Mom lose everything. This house isn't just a roof over our heads, it's the last piece of her dignity. If we lose it, she will break." I took his hand, feeling the calluses and the slight tremor. "I understand, no matter how hard it gets, I'll be with you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a new trust, for the first time in a long time. But things weren't simple. Mr. Peterson pressed his advantage. He spread rumors everywhere that our house was built on disputed land, that our family had no right to be there. His words were like knives, cutting away at my mother-in-law's spirit. She didn't dare leave the house. Every time she heard whispers from the lane, she would tremble like a wounded animal. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I suddenly heard a commotion in the yard. Ethan rushed out, and I followed. In front of us stood Mr. Peterson, with several burly men, holding flashlights and clubs. "I'm here today with a reminder, Mr. Peterson said loudly, his voice firm. "If you're not out of here in 1 week, don't blame me for getting rough." My mother-in-law shakily stood up, wailing, "Mr. Peterson, do you have no conscience? I've suffered enough shame." "Why do you want to take our home too?" he scoffed. "Conscience? Letting Ethan exist was more than enough conscience from me. Now I'm just taking back what I deserve. Ethan clenched his fists and lunged forward, but I threw my arms around him. I knew that if he laid a hand on them, the consequences would be dire. Mr. Peterson was just waiting for an excuse to have him arrested. He wants to provoke you into making a mistake, I whispered in Ethan's ear. Don't give him the satisfaction. Mr. Peterson saw Ethan restrain himself and smirked. Smart boy, pack up and leave on your own. Otherwise, I'll let the whole town watch as your family gets thrown out onto the street like beggars. With that, he turned and left, leaving our yard feeling heavy and violated. After they were gone, Ethan collapsed into a chair, his shirt soaked with sweat. I sat beside him, wiping his forehead, my heart aching. My mother-in-law was huddled in a corner, her eyes vacant, muttering to herself, I should have just gotten rid of the baby back then, so he wouldn't have to suffer like this. Ethan heard her. His eyes turned red, but he didn't say anything. He stood up, walked straight into his room, and slammed the door. I watched him go, my heart clenching. I knew he was carrying an immense wound, but still had to force himself to fight. The next day, Ethan decided to take it a step further. He went to meet with the town supervisor and several respected elders. He wanted to ask them to act as witnesses, to confirm that this land had belonged to his family, passed down through generations. At first, some were hesitant, afraid of crossing Mr. Peterson, but when Ethan knelt before them, his eyes filled with tears, his voice choked with emotion, I'm not asking for anything but justice. If Mr. Peterson takes this from us, my mother and I will have nowhere to go. I'm not begging for myself, only for a fair chance. The elders looked at him, saw the sincerity in his eyes, and finally nodded. They promised to testify if the authorities came to investigate. When I heard the news, a ray of hope flickered within me. But at the same time, I knew Mr. Peterson would not sit idly by. And just as I expected, a few days later, another blow fell. That evening, just as our family had turned off the lights to go to bed, the sound of rocks smashing against the house echoed through the night. Ethan and I jumped up and ran outside. The night was pitch black. We could only see a few figures running away. In the yard, the window was shattered, and a brick lay on the ground next to a message scrawled in red paint. Get out. My mother-in-law trembled and clung to me, sobbing. Ethan held the brick in his hand, his eyes blazing. He wants to drive us to the edge, but I swear, I will not let him win. I looked at him and saw in his tired eyes a new fire, the fire of resistance. I knew that our battle with Mr. Peterson was no longer just a family matter. It had become a fight for our very survival. That night, I lay beside Ethan and heard him whisper, Hannah, I will not let you and Mom lose this house. Whatever the cost, I will protect it. I held him tightly, tears streaming down my face. A vague fear rose in my heart. What would Ethan have to sacrifice to fight Mr. Peterson? And if he was truly determined, how long could we possibly hold on? Outside, the wind howled through the trees, carrying a chilling cold, as if heralding the arrival of a great storm. After the night of the rock throwing, our family lived in a state of constant fear. My mother-in-law wouldn't set foot outside, always trembling like a shadow. Ethan, on the other hand, grew harder. His eyes were always tense, ready to face whatever came next. As for me, I went to bed every night afraid, not knowing what new scheme Mr. Peterson would unleash to break us. The truth was, just as I suspected, he didn't stop. 2 days later, the township officials returned, this time with a notice temporarily suspending our right to use the land, citing an unresolved dispute. Although we hadn't lost the house yet, it meant we were facing the real possibility of being left with nothing. My mother-in-law clutched her chest, gasping for air, nearly fainting when she heard the news. I quickly helped her to her room, my heart feeling like it was being sliced. Ethan held the notice in his hand, his eyes blazing. He shouted, "He doesn't just want the land. He wants to kill our family's spirit." I squeezed his hand, trembling. But what can we do? He has connections. We have nothing but our 2 hands. Ethan turned to me, his gaze firm. No, we're not empty-handed. We have the truth. He can twist everything, but he can't twist the memories of those who witnessed it. He spent the next several days tirelessly seeking out every elder in town, every witness to the past. At first, they were hesitant to side with us, fearing Mr. Peterson's power. But Ethan didn't give up. He knelt and begged. His voice choked. "If you all stay silent, my mother and I will lose everything. I'm not asking for anything for myself, only for justice." In the end, his sincerity and determination moved a few of them. They nodded, promising to stand as witnesses when needed. Seeing this, a glimmer of hope rose in me. But just as that glimmer appeared, Mr. Peterson launched another vicious attack. One evening, as Ethan was returning from the town supervisor's house, several strangers were waiting at our gate. Their faces were menacing, and they held clubs in their hands. They didn't say much, just a cold message. "If you don't want anything to happen to your mother, you'll know to pack up and leave." Then, one of them slammed his club against our iron gate. The sharp, metallic clang made my mother-in-law and me jump in terror. Ethan stepped forward, his eyes blazing, but I threw my arms around him, holding him back. I knew that if he made a move, they would attack immediately. When they had gone, Ethan punched the wall, blood trickling from his knuckles. He roared in frustration. "He wants to push us to the brink." I held him, sobbing, "But you can't be provoked. That's exactly what he wants." That night, no one in our family slept. Outside, the sound of dogs barking echoed in the silent darkness, making me even more anxious. I knew Mr. Peterson had started using thugs to terrorize us. The next day, a turning point came. The town supervisor came to our house, carrying a file of old documents he had found by chance in the town archives. It was an official record confirming that Frank, my mother-in-law's late husband, had been granted ownership of this land by the government decades ago. Ethan took it, his hands trembling, his eyes shining. He whispered, "This is it. This is the proof. This is the weapon we can use to fight him." I was so moved I started to cry. For the first time in so long, I saw a clear light at the end of a dark tunnel. But Ethan had barely had a moment to breathe when Mr. Peterson appeared that afternoon, accompanied by several strangers. He sat down in our yard, his voice dripping with condescension. "I hear you got your hands on some old papers, but don't think that means you've won. Papers can be faked, witnesses can be bought. Do you really think you can stand against me?" Ethan faced him, his gaze steady. "I don't need lies. I have the truth. You can fabricate, you can threaten, but you cannot deny what my ancestors left me." Mr. Peterson scoffed, took a drag from his cigarette, and blew the smoke in Ethan's face. "You've got a tough mouth, but you forget I can take more than just your land. I can also take away what you love most." With that, he glanced at me. His look sent a chill down my spine, my heart pounded in my chest. I knew he wasn't making an empty threat. Ethan lunged forward and grabbed him by the collar, roaring, "Don't you ever touch my wife." His men immediately moved in, but I rushed forward, screaming, "Ethan, no! This is the trap he's setting for you." Ethan let go, breathing heavily, his eyes red. "Mr. Peterson straightened his shirt and smirked triumphantly. "The hearing is in 1 week. I trust you'll be left with nothing. Get ready to move out." With that, he left, leaving us stunned in the middle of our yard. That night, Ethan sat at the table, spreading out the documents, carefully noting every detail. I quietly made him a cup of tea, my heart aching as I looked at his thin frame. He was betting everything honor, love, family in this lopsided battle. He took my hand, his voice low. "Hannah, no matter the outcome, I have only one wish, that you and Mom will still have a roof over your heads." I threw my arms around him, tears streaming. "I don't need a house. I don't need anything. I just need you." He smiled faintly, a weak but resolute smile. "But I need to protect you, to protect Mom. That's my responsibility." The day of the hearing drew near. The tension in our house was palpable. The town was buzzing with speculation. Some hoped we would keep our home, others sided with Mr. Peterson, fearing his influence. The night before the hearing, Ethan said something unexpected. "Hannah, we might lose tomorrow, but I swear, I will not let him achieve his goal. If the court is unjust, I will present all the evidence, all the witnesses, to the entire town. Even if we're thrown out on the street, I want everyone to know his true face." I looked at him, filled with both fear and admiration. This once meek man had become a steadfast mountain. I held him tightly and whispered, "I believe in you. No matter what, I'm with you." Outside, the moon hung in the sky, its faint light shining down on our small house, bracing itself against the storm. I knew that tomorrow would be a fight for our lives. That morning, the sky was a grim, overcast gray, as if heralding a great storm. My mother, Ethan, and I walked silently to the town hall, where the land dispute hearing was to take place. My heart was pounding, my hands clutching the hem of my dress. My mother-in-law was trembling, her face pale. But Ethan walked between us, his back straight, his gaze determined. The hall was packed. Townspeople had come from all over, crowding inside and out, all wanting to witness the confrontation. In the front row, Mr. Peterson sat proudly, a look of smug satisfaction on his face. Beside him was a well-dressed lawyer, his expression cold, holding a thick stack of documents. As the chairman banged the gavel to open the session, the atmosphere immediately grew tense. Mr. Peterson was the first to stand. His voice was loud and clear. "Members of the board, I am here today to demand justice. The land that Margaret Miller's family is living on actually belonged to my father for many decades. They have been illegally occupying it. I have all the necessary witnesses and documents to prove it." With that, he signaled to his lawyer, who quickly presented a series of photocopied documents with bright red seals. A murmur went through the crowd, and many people nodded. My mother-in-law turned pale, her hands clenched together. Ethan stood up. His voice was not loud, but it was firm. "Honorable members of the board, those documents are complete forgeries. I have in my possession the original land title certificate, issued by the government to my father, Frank Miller, in the 1980s. This is authentic, irrefutable proof." He presented the old yellowed papers that the town supervisor had found. The chairman carefully examined them, nodding in confirmation of the seal and signatures from that era. The crowd murmured again, this time with more eyes on Ethan. Mr. Peterson was momentarily taken aback, but quickly regained his composure. He sneered. "A single, worn-out piece of paper is supposed to prove something. Your father is gone. Who's to say that paper wasn't swapped?" Ethan clenched his fists, but remained calm. He turned to the board. "In addition to the documents, I also have witnesses. These are the elders of our town, who lived through that time, and know the property lines." Immediately, 3 elderly men were helped forward. They nodded and confirmed that the land had long belonged to our family, and had been legally farmed by Frank. One of them even said clearly, "I remember helping Frank build that house with my own hands." Everyone in town knew that land was his. The whispering grew louder, with many now leaning in Ethan's favor. Mr. Peterson's face darkened, but he wasn't ready to give up. His lawyer stood up, his voice sharp. "Members of the board, testimony is just hearsay. It has no legal value. We have a more recent, valid document proving this land was transferred to Mr. Peterson." He presented a contract with a sloppy signature, dated just a few years ago. Anyone could see it was suspicious, but the lawyer's confident tone made the crowd murmur again. Ethan suddenly let out a cold laugh. He pulled another paper from his pocket. "In that case, I'd like to ask the board, why does the signature on this contract perfectly match, down to every stroke, the signature in the records of a man who has been deceased for over 10 years? The entire hall gasped. The chairman frowned and sent the contract for a quick expert review. The result was confirmed moments later. It was indeed a forgery. The lawyer's face changed color, and Mr. Peterson slammed his hand on the table in fury. You dare to set a trap for me," he roared. Ethan looked him straight in the eye, his voice firm. "I didn't set a trap. Your own greed and lies trapped you." The atmosphere in the hall reached a fever pitch. The townspeople were whispering, many looking at Mr. Peterson with disgust. The chairman banged his gavel, his voice stern. After reviewing the original documents, cross-referencing witness testimony, and considering the evidence of forgery from the plaintiff's side, this board provisionally concludes that the right to use the land belongs to the family of Frank and Margaret Miller. A round of applause erupted. My mother-in-law burst into tears and hugged me tightly. I looked at Ethan, my vision blurred by my own tears. He stood tall, his face resolute, his eyes shining as if he had just escaped the darkness. But Mr. Peterson was not defeated. He jumped to his feet and pointed at Ethan, screaming, "Don't think you've won. You're an illegitimate child, the result of a filthy affair. This whole town will despise you for the rest of your life." His voice was like a dagger. The hall fell silent. People looked at each other, whispering. My mother-in-law collapsed, her face drained of all color. Ethan was silent for a long moment. Then he stepped forward, his voice ringing out. "Yes, I am the result of a mistake. But I did not choose how I was born. I choose how I live. I work with my own two hands. I love my wife. I care for my elderly mother. If you want to despise me for the things I do, not for someone else's past." The hall was quiet for a few seconds. Then a new wave of whispers broke out. Some people nodded. Others had tears in their eyes. An old woman stood up and clapped loudly. "Well said. A person should live by their present, not by the stains of the past." Gradually, the applause spread, and the whole hall was filled with it. Mr. Peterson stood frozen, his face red with anger and shame. The chairman banged his gavel one last time, declared the hearing closed, upheld our family's ownership of the land, and issued a warning to Mr. Peterson for document forgery. Ethan turned to me, his eyes shining. I saw in him not just resilience, but pride. He had stood up, held his head high, not letting the past weigh him down, not letting another man's pettiness crush him. But as the crowd dispersed, I caught a glimpse of Mr. Peterson standing alone in a corner of the yard, his eyes red like a cornered animal. I shivered. I knew he wouldn't stop. Having lost in court, he would find another way to get revenge. And next time, it might not just be about land or honor. The hearing was over, and it seemed as though everything had been settled. The whispers in town gradually died down. Many people even went out of their way to shake Ethan's hand and offer words of encouragement. They looked at him differently now, not with curiosity or scorn, but with respect for his honesty and courage. My mother-in-law, though still frail, seemed to breathe a little easier after that day. She would sit in the yard and sometimes mumble, "We finally kept the house." Frank must be smiling down from heaven. I could see she had aged, but her eyes were no longer filled with the panic of before. As for Ethan, he was busier than ever. After ensuring his mother was okay, he threw himself back into his work, determined to rebuild the finances that had suffered during the crisis. I looked at my husband with a mixture of love and pride. The once gentle man had become a solid pillar, carrying the whole family on his shoulders. Yet, a nagging worry remained in my heart. Mr. Peterson was a vengeful man, not one to accept defeat easily. The look in his eyes at the end of the hearing still haunted me red with rage, like a wounded animal ready to tear its prey apart. And just as my intuition warned me, the storm was not over. New waves were already on their way. One evening, as Ethan and I were finishing dinner, there was a knock on the door. It was our neighbor, Tom. He was out of breath. "Ethan, Hannah, have you heard? Mr. Peterson just went to the county sheriff's office and filed a complaint against you for assault and document forgery." I was speechless. Ethan froze. Clearly, he was trying another tactic to turn the tables. "That's a lie," Ethan roared. "I didn't assault anyone. And the documents are real. They were verified." Tom sighed. "I know, but you know what he's like. He might bribe someone here and there, drag you into a legal mess." At this, my hands and feet went cold. My mother-in-law trembled and collapsed, stammering, "Oh my God, he wants to destroy our whole family." Ethan clenched his fists, a fierce determination in his eyes. "No, I won't let him lead me by the nose." The next day, Ethan went to the county office himself, bringing all the original documents and the witnesses with him. He presented his case clearly to the investigators. They listened, made no immediate conclusion, and said they would review the matter. On the way home, Ethan took my hand, his voice low. "He wants to frame me, but I won't give in. If I have to, I'll present all the evidence to the townspeople again." I nodded, my eyes welling up. "I believe in you. But you have to be careful. He doesn't just play with paper." I hadn't even finished my sentence when, that very night, our family received a new shock. Around 10 p.m., the sound of frantic barking erupted outside. I jumped up and looked out to see our back shed suddenly burst into flames. The fire spread quickly, black smoke billowing into the sky. I screamed in terror. Ethan immediately rushed to get water. My mother-in-law and I frantically tried to help. Luckily, our neighbors ran over, and together we managed to put out the fire. After nearly an hour, the flames were extinguished. The shed was a smoldering ruin, but thankfully, the fire hadn't reached the main house. I sank to the ground, tears streaming down my face. My mother-in-law fainted in my arms. Ethan was panting, soaked in sweat, his eyes blazing. This wasn't an accident. He hired someone to set the fire. We didn't dare sleep that night. I sat with my mother-in-law, while Ethan stood guard in the yard with a kitchen knife, like a soldier in wartime. I saw his silhouette against the night sky, resolute and so alone, and my heart ached. The next day, Ethan decided to go further. He went back to the county office to have a friend check the file Mr. Peterson had submitted. And just as he suspected, there were many inconsistencies in the complaint, contradictory statements, and clear signs of slander. His friend advised Ethan to be patient and wait for the hearing. He still had a good chance of winning. When he returned, Ethan told me, his voice firm, "Hannah, we will not run. We will fight to the end." I took his hand, tears in my eyes. I knew he had completely changed. He was no longer the gentle, submissive young man, but a man who dared to face the storm. But Mr. Peterson didn't stay quiet either. He spread rumors throughout the town that Ethan was about to go to jail, that our family had nothing left to hold on to. These lies caused my mother-in-law to have a relapse. She became bedridden, refusing to eat. Ethan and I took turns caring for her, our hearts heavy with worry. One evening, she took my hand, tears rolling down her face. "Hannah, please stay with Ethan. No matter what happens, don't leave him. He's suffered so much." I held her tightly, my voice choked. "Don't worry, Mom. I will never leave him." Ethan was standing outside the door, silently wiping away a tear. 3 days later, the township summoned both Ethan and Mr. Peterson for a hearing. The hall was packed again. This time, I held Ethan's hand, my own heart trembling. Mr. Peterson walked in, a triumphant look on his face, his eyes darting towards us with a challenge. When the official asked, he spun his lies smoothly. "I witnessed Ethan assault a man. I have proof that he forged the documents." But when asked to present the evidence, he could only stammer vague accusations. Immediately, Ethan presented the original land title and the signed affidavits from the witnesses. He even spoke with a firm voice. "If I am wrong, I am prepared to face the legal consequences. But if he is lying, I demand that he be prosecuted for slander and for the arson last night." The crowd applauded. Mr. Peterson's face turned purple, and he broke out in a sweat. He roared, "Don't think you've won. I still have plenty more up my sleeve." The official said sternly, "If you continue to make threats, we will take legal action." For the first time, I saw Mr. Peterson flustered, no longer so confident. But the look in his eyes as he left was still full of hatred, red like a cornered beast. I knew he hadn't given up. That night, Ethan sat quietly on the porch, his face gaunt but his eyes shining. He said softly to me, "Hannah, I believe justice will come. The more he struggles, the more he exposes his true self. But I'm worried he'll do something even more vicious." I leaned against his shoulder and whispered, "Whatever happens, I'm with you. We'll get through this together." Outside, the wind howled. The leaves rustled like whispers, heralding the final storm that was fast approaching. In the days following the hearing, the tension in town did not subside. Although the truth was partially out, Mr. Peterson was still secretly plotting his next move. We lived on constant alert, never knowing what new trick he would pull. And then, it happened. One afternoon, during a heavy rainstorm, as Ethan and I were cleaning up the burnt-out shed, we suddenly heard a commotion from the lane. People were shouting and running in panic. I rushed out to see smoke billowing from Mr. Peterson's own storage barn. The flames were spreading rapidly, engulfing the wooden structure filled with hay. A crowd gathered, shouting and bringing buckets of water to fight the fire. But as we got closer, a scene unfolded that left everyone speechless. Mr. Peterson stumbled out of the barn, his face covered in soot, coughing violently. In his panic, he fell to his knees, repeatedly stammering, "No, no, I didn't mean to. I just wanted to scare them." Everyone looked at each other in astonishment. So, he had set his own fire to create a fake crime scene, hoping to frame us. But the fire had spread too quickly, and he himself had been trapped, nearly burning to death. Ethan immediately rushed in with a few other men and helped him away from the fire. I quickly brought him some water to rinse his mouth and pour over him. His whole body was shaking, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and despair. When the fire was extinguished, the whole town gathered, whispering amongst themselves. Everyone looked at him with a mixture of disgust and pity. The town supervisor stepped forward, his voice stern. "Mr. Peterson, is there anything left to deny? You set your own fire to frame others, you forged documents, you spread false rumors. How long do you want this town to look down on you?" Mr. Peterson collapsed, tears streaming down his face. For the first time, I saw this arrogant, domineering man cry like a child. I just wanted people to remember me. My whole life, I've lived quietly, been looked down upon. I was jealous of Margaret, of Ethan. I thought if I dragged them down into the mud, I would feel better. But the more I did, the more I destroyed myself. His voice trailed off in the rain. The crowd was completely silent. The truth was too raw. Everything he had done was out of envy, out of a long-suppressed resentment. My mother-in-law stepped forward, her eyes red, her voice trembling. "Mr. Peterson, even though you have done so many wicked things, I am also at fault. It was my own past mistake that gave you the opportunity to take advantage. I'm not making excuses for myself, but I hope that from now on, you won't sow any more hatred. We are all old now. We don't have many years left. Let our children and grandchildren live in peace." Mr. Peterson bowed his head, his shoulders shaking. No one said another word. After that day, the authorities filed a report and fined Mr. Peterson for disorderly conduct, document forgery, and slander. He lost his land-related privileges, and his reputation in the town was completely shattered. The man who once walked with his head held high now kept his head down, not daring to look anyone in the eye. Even so, Ethan felt no joy. One evening, he sat on the porch and said to me in a low voice, "Hannah, I'm not happy to see him so broken. In truth, he's just a pitiful man who lived in envy until hatred blinded him to everything else. I just hope that after all this, he knows when to stop." I looked at my husband, a sense of pride swelling in my heart. This man, despite being trampled and humiliated, had kept his kind heart. My mother-in-law gradually recovered from her illness. She sat on the porch, watching her son, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Ethan, I owe you so much. I know I was wrong, that I was cruel to you. But you saved me from losing my home, my dignity. I don't know what to say besides I'm sorry." Ethan took his mother's wrinkled hand, his voice choked. "Mom, I once hated you, but hate didn't bring me peace. I've chosen to forgive. No matter what, you are still my mother. From now on, live in peace. Don't let the past bind you anymore." She burst into tears and hugged her son tightly. In that moment, I also cried. All the hatred, the bitterness, finally broke and washed away into forgiveness. Life gradually returned to normal. The townspeople looked at our family differently now, not with scorn, but with respect. Many even came to visit, to share their support, and some even apologized for their past harsh words. Ethan went back to work, diligent as ever. He lived simply, without fanfare, but everyone could see the maturity in him. From a place of being looked down upon, he had stood tall and defined himself. As for me, every evening, I looked at my husband and his mother, my heart filled with gratitude. We had journeyed through a storm of tears, pain, and moments of despair. But it was in that adversity that we learned to stand up, to forgive, and to hold on to our dignity. Mr. Peterson lived quietly, rarely going out, People said he would often sit alone in his yard, his eyes distant. Perhaps he, too, had come to understand the price of hatred and envy. This story left me with a profound lesson. We do not have the power to choose where we are born, but we do have the power to choose how we live. Ethan proved that. He did not let a shameful past bind him, nor did he let hatred consume him. He chose to stand tall and live with decency. And in the end, it was that decency that helped him and his family weather the storm. My mother-in-law also learned that running from the truth only prolongs the pain. Only by facing, admitting, and being honest can a person find peace in their soul. As for Mr. Peterson, his downfall is a warning. Envy, greed, and hatred will only lead to self-destruction. The rain stopped, and the blue sky returned. I sat on the porch, watching Ethan diligently tending to the garden, his mother knitting beside him. It was a simple but warm scene. A rare sense of peace spread through my heart. We had walked through all the tears, the pain, the bitterness to find this moment of tranquility. And I believe that from now on, life will be lighter, because each of us now understands the true value of family, of sincerity, and of human dignity. Dear friends, what do you think of this story? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below so we can share with each other. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to Golden Years Serenity, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the meaningful stories sent out each day.